Welcome to the new episode of BV Weekly. I'm Dave, I'm here with Andrew, and we'll be talking about this week's Indie Sleaze and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame discourse, the new Foo Fighters song, and more. So have you been watching the Olympics?
Yeah, I watch a little bit every night, actually. I am not super invested in what happens, and I'm not super knowledgeable about like the stakes or I'm not super knowledgeable about the Olympics, honestly. Glad this is not an Olympics podcast, but I like to have it on. I feel like I just like to kind of be in the know. I don't know. I find it weirdly relaxing and calming too. It's just kind of a nice, easy thing to have on, and then you get to see skiers do 1800 degree spins, and that's exciting, and curling is always fun. So yeah, I don't know, I like having it on. It's nice, but I'm not I couldn't tell you the name of any of the recent winners.
I totally relate with that feeling. Everything you said, but I actually haven't watched even a single second.
Wow.
I don't know.
So you're okay with being out of the cultural loop?
On this one, I'm sitting this one out, but I know what's happening. I hear people talking about curling a lot, but yeah, I'm not paying attention. And that kind of comforting feeling of just having something on, which kind of goes back to just old school TV of being able to turn on your TV and putting on channel 4 or whatever. Not to be like a boomer, but now I'm I got to turn on my TV, wait for the screen to load, figure out if I'm going to Netflix or HBO or this. And there's just no more turning to channel 4. I don't even know how to get there. So yeah.
Wow. What are you moving into your retirement home?
I don't have cable. I mean, yeah. Do you have cable?
No, I understand. I do think maybe part of the nostalgia there is it was on in my house as a kid when we had
cable. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It just should be easy. I need less steps.
Well, do you have Peacock? I mean, that's how we watch it.
No, I don't have Peacock. No, I don't have Peacock, and I don't have cable. And I'm hitting play on my streaming service way more often than going to turn on my record player and take a vinyl out of the sleeve. So yeah, it's similar, but I do have no problem hitting HBO and Netflix. And so yeah, speaking of, I also went to a theater this week and finally saw Marty Supreme. I keep talking about it, but now I've actually seen it. It was really good to see that soundtrack in a theater with the actual movie playing along with it. And to also hear all the 80s songs that they have in between the Daniel Lopatin songs. And I noticed Lizzie from Gang Gang Dance, fun fact, is in that movie. I don't want to give too much of I won't keep saying this. I try not to give spoilers, but she's kind of a cameo. She's a mom in a pet store. Look for her if you see it. Which, between the 80s songs and Lizzie from Gang Gang Dance showing up, is this movie Indie Sleaze? And now people are like, what does the 80s have to do with Indie Sleaze? So Indie Sleaze is back in the discourse, right? With points that have been being made for years.
Yeah.
Tweets. There's popular tweets right now, people arguing Indie Sleaze is not really a thing, right? Which is kind of a conversation that's always been happening. And why am I saying 80s music in a soundtrack and Gang Gang Dance make Indie Sleaze is because if I think of the Misshapes dance parties, to give a stereotypical kind of club night that was happening during, quote, Indie Sleaze, at those parties, people were dancing to new wave 80s music, in addition to the Strokes and LCD Sound System and the Rapture or whatever dance punk song of the moment was happening, and Gang of Four. But I just and then Gang Gang Dance, arguably an Indie Sleaze band. So those things combined in one movie really meeting the indie sleaze moment to me. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
So, what is this indie sleaze discourse?
Uh, well, as far as I can tell, it stemmed from, I don't have it in front of me, but it stemmed from a tweet where somebody said something like, you know, tell an older millennial that indie sleaze wasn't real, and we'll start talking, something like that. And then it just had all of these different reactions. And, people are getting into like, I think one of the main points being pushed by those who like were there for the 2000s indie boom that this is like about is like nobody called it indie sleaze at the time, and that's annoying to people who were there because they're like, who are these young people coming in and giving a new name to something that I lived? And I mean, I would say that happens all the time. The first example that comes to mind for me is yacht rock, which wasn't called that until the like early 2000s, mid 2000s maybe. And now like we just all use yacht rock to mean, you know, like Loggins and Messina and Toto and all that stuff that it wasn't called yacht rock at the time, but like, phrases and words get assigned to things later, and they stick. And I mean, I'll be honest, like I don't like it. I don't like the term indie sleaze, but if it's gonna stick and then people are just gonna use it and it's a quick way to say something and everybody knows what you mean, like I'm not really gonna argue about it. A few years ago, I think we were summing up that era by calling it like the meet me in the bathroom era because of the book and then the documentary that followed. And now it's the indie sleaze era. Whatever. Maybe it'll be something else in a few years.
And indie, well, first of all, to be fair, I don't think anybody's actually claiming it was called that. So people,
No, people are just upset that because it's now, this is like the first generation that this phenomena is happening to. The same generation that named yacht rock is having something they lived through being named something else, and they're like, wait, I don't like this. And it's like, oh, so now you get it, like, so no one's saying that it was called that. It's just that the people who lived it are kind of having, I think, their first experience with something they lived being called something new by people who didn't live it, and they're having their like, unk moment or whatever.
and then but it's not just the music of the time. It's not just the Strokes and an LCD sound system and related bands. It's also the fashion as seen in American Apparel ads from the time, the actual American Apparel clothes people were wearing while attending parties like Misshapes that I mentioned earlier, which were heavily documented by a rise in party photographers like shout out Last Night's Party, Nikki Digital, Cobra Snake, Driven by Boredom, and actual galleries that would appear on Misshape's own website each week after the show. I'm calling it a show, after the party. So this kind of like combined looking back at those pictures, seeing what people looked like while they were drinking Sparks in all these parties around New York City specifically. Did indie sleaze happen anywhere else? I don't know, but they, so they're like combining
In
this
the UK,
music.
it would have happened in London, right?
Oh, right. So yeah, it's this combination of like the bands that were popular at the time and the parties. And I think another part of the discourse is people are arguing that these are unrelated things, the parties and the bands, the music scene that are being combined into one thing. I don't think they're as unrelated as people think. I mean, I was there. First of all, at the time, we were just, if you wanted to be negative about a lot of what was going on here, you were just using the term hipster, right?
Yeah.
So hipsters were going to these parties. Hipsters were getting photographed and living in Williamsburg and all this stuff. And hipsters were listening to these bands that were written about by hipster blog Brooklyn Vegan, right? We were part of this. So I guess Brooklyn Vegan was also indie sleaze. But on Brooklyn Vegan, we very much cared about Misshapes, and we very much cared about all these bands we're talking about. So if Brooklyn Vegan was indie sleaze, I mean, if Brooklyn, all I'm saying is these things were related. I was doing an article about Misshapes, one article before the Strokes. And then you know what? Members of the AES or other musicians were all DJing at Misshapes. It started to become like a stop on your PR tour. You were coming over from the UK or Sweden or Norway for your first US show that in like a New York City club, and every blogger was going to be there, and Pitchfork was going to give the album a high review, and you were guest DJing at Misshapes, let's say. So there was like, and they were playing those songs at Misshapes. But then to go back to the point I made about Marty Supreme earlier, it's like they were also playing songs from the 80s and 90s. And so I don't know what the indie sleaze revival parties are like now. You know, they're doing like, instead of emo night, indie sleaze night. That's becoming a thing, which is kind of crazy because I thought indie sleaze would be a trend 2 years ago that like was dead by now, but it's kind of still a thing. And maybe more than ever this week again. But are they playing 80s music at indie sleaze parties is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I mean, I think like it's what you brought up about the fashion and the photography. It's like, I think some people don't like the term because sleaze is like a negative connotation. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter just being like, back then we were just having fun and what didn't feel sleazy. And then I think like the aspect of the sleaze really relates to like the party atmosphere. You know, you talked about like the drinking sparks, right? Like, and like the fashion, the photography, the party, like it just kind of like, I think it gives you in your mind, like maybe it feels like it's more focused on the fashion and the nightlife. And so maybe if it gets applied to a band like Block Party or something, maybe someone feels like, oh, like that, like you could be a Block Party fan and not be living this like, you know, sleazy nightlife life. Like they didn't have, I think that's kind of the thing too. I understand like what you're saying is that like these, I'm not saying they didn't go hand in hand, but I think that, you know, it's like someone else brought up on Twitter, the James Murphy lyric from LCD Sound System, Losing My Edge, like the borrowed nostalgia for an unremembered 80s. Like that was him talking at the time of like these younger people in the early 2000s acting like they knew everything about the coolest underground 80s music. And then he's like, but I was there, you know, it's like you weren't. And it's like, you know, and it's self-aware, obviously. And that's just happening now again about the era that was copying the 80s. It's like funny that now we have like nostalgia for 20 years ago, which at the time was nostalgia for 20 years ago.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just like this younger generation who are looking at this phenomena, this moment, this era in time through this rose-colored lens of they weren't there, and they're just kind of seeing like some things that maybe were connected, maybe weren't connected, maybe were like more adjacent than truly connected, and just kind of lumping it all into one thing. And then I think if you again were there, then you might want to step in with the nuance of like, you know, like to me, when I hear indie sleaze and it's about the music, to me, it's the stuff that kind of toes the line between punk and dance. Like I think of like the DFA stuff, Justice, bands like the AAS and Block Party who were punky and dancey. But you know, like but you talked about everybody DJ'd Misshapes, right? Jenny Lewis DJ'd Misshapes. Is Rilo Kiley indie sleaze? To me, no. But if you do an indie sleaze festival or make an indie sleaze playlist, or you know, and Rilo Kiley is on it, is that out of place? No. So like these things all just get. It's like the same thing with, you know, again, yacht rock, or you know what's a better example? Classic rock. That's another huge thing that wasn't called that at the time, right? How could you have called it classic rock when it was happening? But I grew up in the 90s listening to classic rock radio, and it's primarily music from the mid 60s to late 70s. But then they would play Guns N' Roses from 1988. And it's like, that's actually a full, at least decade removed from what most people consider classic rock. But by the 90s, it was enough similar. It was similar enough, and it worked, and it became classic rock, even though it really wasn't part of, like, you know, Led Zeppelin were broken up by the time Guns N' Roses formed, but these things were the same to a kid in the 90s listening to classic rock radio. And then if you were there, you might hear that and be like, that's ridiculous, you know, and you'd give the nuance. But I think that's just what happens. So, like,
I think the Dare have proved that it's possible to be an artist now and called indie sleaze.
yeah, the Dare fuckers, like they seem to me that they're especially leaning into the fashion, the nightlife, the partying, the dance punk seesaw, whatever, like that line between dance and punk. But then you have like Geese, right, who like are not a danceable punky band, but I could totally see Geese fans wanting to go down the quote indie sleaze rabbit hole, because that in many ways paved the way for a band like Geese to exist, even though Geese don't do the sort of like dance punk party life, late night DJ set thing that the Dare and fuckers do.
I want to go back to Block Party for a second and more
Hmm.
proof on how these things are connected, because another big party of the actual indie sleaze era, if you want to call it that, was Motherfucker, which this was a New York City party that lasted for years. There's an old documentary about it. I went to many Motherfucker parties. They were great. And they always happened on like a holiday weekend. So if it was like Memorial Day Eve or whatever, there would be a Motherfucker, as opposed to Misshapes, which was shorter lasting, but was weekly, a weekly thing. And then, and Motherfucker would always have a band as well. They'd have a lot of DJs. I mean, it's totally possible the Misshapes DJs DJ'd Motherfucker, but Motherfucker also had their own crew that put it together, a mix of like kind of current dance DJ people of the time, along with kind of more nightlife legends that created this later. But they where I'm going with this, they always had bands. Some of the most memorable like Motherfucker parties, I remember, I'm not calling this one memorable, but like the Bravery played Motherfucker. New York Dolls also played Motherfucker. But what I most remember, my favorite show I ever saw at a Motherfucker party was Block Party. This was right around the time Silent Alarm came out. I saw Block Party many times during those years, including their first show at Knitting Factory, their first New York City show at Knitting Factory. I think it was their first. And followed them. I was obsessed with Block Party. But when they played Motherfucker, that was truly, I mean, I have like a famous BV blog post from the time where I came back and just posted a single picture from the show and wrote, the headline was like, Block Party is the best motherfucking band in the world or something. And the pun was probably intended. But yeah, anyway, I just remember that show being really exciting. And I think the party vibe helped. But more importantly, that was like DJs on one floor, Block Party came on at one point. That was very much like the culmination of all things they're calling now indie sleaze, if that's the right word.
Right. I mean,
In
again,
real time.
to me, it's like electro clash, right? It's like it's that meeting point between DJ culture and rock culture is what I feel is at the heart of this. But then, like, let me ask you, like, is the National indie sleaze?
I don't think so, but they're indie sleaze adjacent because people were listening to Block Party and the National at the same time.
Right. I mean, the National are a similar band to the Strokes, Interpol, the Walkmen, right? Like all that New York City rock revival stuff. You wouldn't have to include the National, but
You could put
they
a
didn't have
National on a
like
playlist.
they didn't have the dancey element. They didn't have like the trashy element.
Right. Just side note about Electroclash, there's a genre that very much was named in real time and was
Yes.
like purposely going for something. But the Electroclash should be indie sleaze as well.
Yes.
I mean,
Electroclash is indie sleaze.
and at Lux, the famous Electroclash party, and Electroclash being, I don't know where I'm going with this point, but Electroclash was penned by Larry T, who was a DJ and famous club kid of the 90s from like Michael Alec and Limelight. He also wrote and RuPaul's biggest hit. So that, he was, like I said, a lot of nightlife legends were kind of leading the moment 10 years later for people during the indie sleaze era. And it was kind of the next thing. Anyway, I don't have a fully formed point there, but indie sleaze was definitely part. I mean, Electroclash was definitely part of indie sleaze.
So you think indie sleaze is real?
I think that, well, it's definitely real because people have willed it into being. And I don't think that you should be confused if you go to an indie sleaze revival party or follow an indie sleaze photo Instagram at like the collection of things you're experiencing in those places.
And how does it make you feel, the phrase indie sleaze, as someone who lived it?
Neutral.
Okay.
Because I also feel like they're celebrate. I know you're saying sleaze is negative, and maybe like the American Apparel guy best exemplifies that, well, like the negative aspect of indie sleaze, or like a John Waters kind of thing, but that's not negative. So I feel like the sleaze is being celebrated, I guess. You know, if I'm 19 and going to indie sleaze parties, that's all positive to me. That's
Mhm.
exciting. I'm
Right.
getting
I don't
wasted.
think like the dare is taking the word sleaze negatively, but I do think maybe people who went to these parties, I mean, I don't have to think. I have seen, again, posts from people who were like, I was there and it didn't feel sleazy at the time. There are definitely people reacting against that. But I do agree with you. I think that there's like a reclaiming of, it's like celebrating the sleaziness, the trashiness. Wait, is Kesha indie sleaze?
I, I do not feel qualified to answer that.
See, I would say yes, because early Kesha was leaning into like, I feel like she was a pop star product. Like she took to the pop world elements of what we now are, what they're calling indie sleaze, the celebrating the trashiness, a little bit of electro clash. But then I think for indie sleaze to maybe more accurately include Kesha than the National is a good example of why the term is just really hard to define.
But you're
You know what
also
I'm saying?
talking about a popular uh, thing that happens, which is also, you know, misshapes. Let's use misshapes was the party of the moment in whatever the kind of movement that's happening with the kids that combines fashion and club nights. The pop world always starts taking from that. Fashion designers always start taking from that. There's countless examples of like the 90s Limelight Club kids inspiring major designers. Madonna famously DJ'd misshapes. Like I said, it's like a PR thing. Of course, Madonna probably every 5 years shows up as a surprise at whatever like popular nightlife thing is happening. It's kind of how pop star, and always it kind of it it's mutually beneficial. Everyone in the crowd is really excited, and it also helps Madonna seem relevant, let's say. So, but it's just this tradition of the kids kind of trend setting and being trendsetters. And so, yes, there should be no surprise that like everything cool that was happening during that era then showed up in pop,
Or
if
at
that
least in
makes sense.
Kesha.
I mean, what about Charlie XCX? But all right.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, Brat is indie sleaze. Brat is basically, I mean, Von Dutch hats, It Girl era, like Paris Hilton, um, Electro Clash. These are all on the mood board for Brat, and Brat is absolutely like it's Brad. It almost sums up the sort of looking at that era through a nostalgia lens and spitting it back out in a slightly different way than it looked at the time, but similar enough. That's what that album is. It's, yeah,
Speaking of, have you seen The Moment yet?
no.
When we were talking about Charlie last week and how her new album is not the soundtrack to the movie she's in, the movie she's in being The Moment, I don't think I even realized during that conversation that The Moment is also a mockumentary about Brat. Super
Hmm.
obvious to those of you who already knew that listening.
The
But
Moment's
anyway,
probably more indie sleaze than Marty Supreme.
exactly. So, Rock and Roll
But
Hall of Fame.
I was going to say, speaking of phrases that people just argue about what they really mean, how about rock and roll? Um,
We
So I mentioned when we were talking about, people were mad that Turnstile won a metal Grammy because they're not metal. And I compared it to people getting mad about rap being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I actually even brought up the example of people using Iron Maiden is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and rappers are as like this cliche thing to be mad about. And since I said that on BV Weekly, I mean, he must be a listener. Gene Simmons of Kiss, who is no stranger to getting upset about rap being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, said again, and I quote, hip hop does not belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he even said the fact that Iron Maiden is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when they can sell at stadiums and Grandmaster Flash is. So there's that example. But yeah, Gene Simmons said this stuff. He's been saying it for over a decade. And it started it restarted another conversation that we've had over and over again, which is, does rap belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Gene Simmons says a lot of questionable things. I can't be mad at Gene Simmons for having this opinion. How old is he?
I don't know.
Close to 80. We need Gene Simmons to have this opinion.
Do we? Do need anyone to have this opinion?
I mean, is anybody taking it like super seriously? Of course, there's other people that share his opinion.
Right. There's a lot of people that share his opinion. And I think the thing with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is that, like, the same people who, the only people who really care about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame seem to be people who share his opinion. I think a lot of people that disagree with it probably don't even care that much about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, right. We're talking about unserious things. Gene Simmons and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
But regardless, it brought this conversation back, and it's a conversation that has happened publicly for a long time, like, because he has said, like, should Led Zeppelin be in the Hip Hop Hall of Fame? There is no Hip Hop Hall of Fame, by the way. But Chuck D already responded publicly to Gene Simmons. So Chuck D of Public Enemy has at least taken him seriously. And he said, Kiss are rock gods, but they don't have a lot of role to them. I think it brings up a pretty good point of, like, what does rock and roll even mean? Because you could really argue that rock and roll hasn't existed since like 1959, and that all the rock music that came post Beatles is not rock and roll. It's just rock. And then if there's no roll, should that even be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? So, like, Iron Maiden certainly has no role. There is nothing, like, Iron Maiden sound very different than, Chuck Berry when you think about what would make something rock and roll. Green Day are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have no role. I think asking what rock and roll even means, it's like, what, like, if you say this thing isn't rock and roll, like the rap isn't rock and roll, you could easily say, well, like, heavy metal isn't rock and roll either. But heavy metal is obviously rock. But I think, to me, what's even more interesting, more important, is actually a version of what Ice Cube said 10 years ago when NWA was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He addressed it. He said, the question is, are we rock and roll? And I say, you goddamn right, we're rock and roll. He said rock and roll is not an instrument and not even a style of music. It's a spirit. It's been going since the blues, jazz, bebop, soul, R&B, rock and roll, heavy metal, punk rock, and yes, hip hop. And I mean, also worth noting, Miles Davis and ABBA are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Are Miles Davis and ABBA any more or less rock and roll than Eminem and Jay-Z?
Are there any indie sleaze bands in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Are the Strokes in it? Can't remember.
I do not know the answer.
They're eligible.
White Stripes are in it, right?
Okay, so White Stripes are in it. So they're indies. Right, they were just inducted this year.
Into indie sleaze?
Into the Indie Sleaze Hall of Fame. I'm sure Jack White would agree that hip hop counts. But to me, like, I think it really just comes down to, like, the rock and, first of all, when you look at the qualifications to get in, it doesn't mention genre anywhere. And second of all, it's like all people are focusing on is the name of the Hall of Fame. Like, if they change the name to the Pop Music Hall of Fame, then conversation would end and it would be exactly the same Hall of Fame, you know, but they shouldn't have to change their name. Just like we talk about how cool it is to see hardcore festivals like Outbreak Fest bring all this different type of music, like everything from hip hop to emo to indie rock. Now, This Is Hardcore in Philly is a similar festival to Outbreak, but if This Is Hardcore were to book hip hop and emo and indie rock, would people be more up in arms because it's called This Is Hardcore than Outbreak Fest? You know, like is This Is Hardcore not allowed to expand because they've put a genre in their name, and Outbreak is because they haven't? You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I agree. I think hip hop should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It doesn't bother me at all that it's called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, just get over it. I do think there's more of a point when it comes to why is this certain band not yet in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And then I can see how you're like, a hip hop artist got in before this like very old rock band who has yet to get in. And I also see how this can get thorny if you start wondering, like, can an EDM artist get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Like, if you start
I think
wondering
so.
yeah, but would
There
they?
is electronic music in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, isn't there?
Okay,
I mean, are
I
Daft Punk in it? They should be. Like,
right, they should.
Daft Punk are rock stars.
Would Gene Simmons think Daft Punk belongs in the Rock
Probably
and Roll Hall
not.
of Fame? Uh, is there? I know there's another country Hall of Fame, which I should have I should have just fully looked into this, but there's some country Hall of Fame thing going on right now that just acknowledged MJ Lenderman and Wednesday.
Hmm.
Um, kind of interesting, but like, does country not get into the Rock and Roll Hall of
No, there
Fame?
is country in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Are they less likely to get in?
Well, there's definitely like early country that influenced rock or
Right.
rock and roll. Like I think like Hank Williams, I think is in it. Um, but again, like I would again have to. I don't know off the top of my head who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but let's just say hypothetically, like somebody like Willie Nelson. I mean, Willie Nelson is a rock star, and a country singer. So like, if he's in it, that makes sense. If he's not in it, he should be. Um, but I think that down the line, I mean, who's a big country singer? Like my mind's going to Chris Stapleton, but then I'm like, that's also rock music anyway. So like, I don't know.
Well, Willie Nelson was inducted in 2023. I mean,
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
there's an
see?
example though. Why did that take so long?
I mean, they only induct like 5 or 6 artists a year or something. So it's
Right.
just that's to me like my answer to that is always just like the method they've chosen. It's just going to take so long because there's already just like probably hundreds that deserve to be in there. I mean,
They
definitely
also
hundreds.
figured out at some point that like by taking their time, it gets people to argue more and
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's
validates
a
their
mhm.
existence. If
But
no
the
one's
last
talking
thing,
about it,
yeah, right. I mean, the last thing I'll say though about this is I think that it's another way I like to look at it is rock and roll and rock star like honestly has meaning that transcends a style of music, right? You can be a rock star in any field. If you're an incredible like software developer, then you're like a rock star coder, you know? Like rockstar doesn't even mean you play music. So are Eminem and Jay-Z and Ice Cube rock stars? Absolutely. Those are rock stars. I think, you know, to just look at it in terms of like this artist isn't playing a guitar is kind of missing the overall picture of what it could even mean to rock and roll.
are Nine Inch Nails in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yeah, they are, right?
Would they still have gotten inducted if they knew they were going to add Boys Noise to their band?
I mean, they were doing electronic music even without Boys Noise.
I know that was just, yeah, Nine Inch Nails were inducted in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a really bad attempt at a segue into me pointing out that I went to see Nine Inch Nails and Boys Noise again for the second time on this tour, the new leg of the tour in New Jersey at Prudential Center the other night. And it was amazing once again.
Awesome. I was there with you the first time. I didn't go the second time, but
I missed you. You know, what's crazy is like, we knew a lot of people that went, they played 2 nights at Barclays Center the first time around. And now they just started the second leg. That was fall 2025. Now it's like ongoing, and go see this tour, by the way, if you haven't. But so many people we knew that went also in Brooklyn last year went again in New Jersey this time. Not you, obviously, but yeah, there was like a large amount of people that I saw at the show or just knew were going to the show that were there at least a second time. I talked to someone at the show who that was their fourth show on the tour. So people are loving this one. It was really good. Like,
How
as
many of
we've
those
talked about,
people? Sorry, go ahead.
no, if you don't know, like Nine Inch Nails is doing this 2-stage thing. They do a more classic version of Nine Inch Nails on the big stage, and then they have a smaller square stage in the middle of the arena with that's where Boys Noise, who also is like a DJ type set that opens, he then joins Nine Inch Nails as a member, and they
Is
play
Boys
these
Noise indie sleaze?
Yes, actually. I mean, that's crazy thing about Boys Noise has been around since
Yeah.
I would have to double check this, but I bet like Boys Noise played Studio B, another key indie sleaze venue or whatever it is. But Boys Noise is German though, but I don't think that keeps you out of indie sleaze.
I
That
don't
was
think
like a
so.
dumb thing to say. But I guess I was thinking like he wouldn't have been in New York City often. But that's besides the point.
Yeah, but you don't
So
think there were indie sleaze parties in Berlin?
I mean, yes, actually, that's a good point. Berlin would have been another place where that was happening if that was happening outside of New York. But Boys Noise plays on the mini stage in the middle of the arena, and they're doing like remixed versions, including of like Closer. If you haven't seen that, there is an amazing video on Brooklyn Vegan Instagram of that song. And anyway, Nine Inch Nails was good.
And
Again,
as we've mentioned on the show before, Coachella has 9-inch Noise built, and I think we're all just assuming 9-inch Noise has got to be a full set of the 9-inch Nails Boys Noise portion of this tour.
right, because they could be billing this tour as 9-inch Noise, but yeah, it makes sense
not,
then
yeah.
that it's just the part where Boys Noise is in it, right?
And I'm wondering if it's going to be this one-off like hour-long version where like one time only Boys Noise is there changing up songs that on the current tour he's not doing with them. But we'll be able to talk about that in a couple
In
months.
April. Yeah. And as a lot of people in the comments are requesting, they need to release these Boys Noise remixes.
Yeah, they do.
Which I would be really surprised if they never do. It's just, they're really good and they're playing them. So you got to release them.
Now, how many people, you said there was you just knew so many people at the Nine Inch Nails show. How many of those people were also at Zababa?
At least one, actually. There was one friend, shout out Corey, who I saw at both Nine Inch Nails and Zabalba the very next night. So I actually did 3 nights in a row of shows. I went on, on Friday night, I went to Manhattan to Bowery Ballroom to see Agriculture, which was with Amanda. And that was amazing. Agriculture being one of our favorite albums, who put out one of our favorite albums of 2025, also one of our favorite metal albums of 2025, also an album that has a lot of not metal elements, which was really, as Amanda wrote on her post on Brooklyn Vegan, which also has photos from that show, has like the clean vocal segments, the clean vocal songs that they do that stood out even more live. You know, the one member could easily put out a full album of like Bonnie Prince Billy sounding.
Well, he did do a solo
music.
record.
Yeah, but is that what that
it's
that.
It's half shoegaze,
Right.
where he's doing all clean singing, and then half metal. But the shoegaze half is basically like what you're describing, pretty much.
Shoegaze Bonnie Prince Billy.
Yeah, basically. It's not like even that shoegazy. It's more like slowcore. I guess. Genres, whatever. But he basically has done a full album where he sings like that, and it's very satisfying. Personally, as a fan of his singing in Agriculture, I was very happy about. Didn't get talked about enough.
I agree. especially after seeing the live show. I was like, I need to go back to that. And that also
Mm.
came out on the Flenser, right? Which is
No, I think it was. I think it was either self-released or like a smaller label or something.
okay. Well, another thing about the agriculture show in general that stood out is, especially because I had heard like years ago, I don't know who told me this, but that they weren't like fully there live yet. We're talking over 2 years ago, though. They were very, very much there live, and the musicianship was insanely impressive. Their drummer is completely insane. Okay, there's at least one thing that Nine Inch Nails and Agriculture both had in common: drum solos. Josh Freese, as we know, now a member of Nine Inch Nails, adds a lot to the show. We talked about this last time too. Once again, it's just amazing to hear and watch Josh Freese drum. And by watch, I mean they're projecting him giant on like the curtain thingy, see-through curtain around the big stage and the screens on the side. Josh Freese gets a little
They
drums.
know what they've got in Josh Freese as a drummer.
Yeah, and when they do the drum solo, and when they introduce each member of Nine Inch Nails, by they I mean when Trent introduces each member of Nine Inch Nails, like Atticus, of course, gets a big cheers, but like Josh Freese gets big
Mhm.
cheers. You always notice like who people are most excited about. Usually, the most classic members get the biggest cheers, but
I mean,
yeah, Josh,
he's a rock star.
absolutely, and
And so
also a rock star, Agriculture's drummer. Oh my god! And I don't even know if you call what Josh Freese had a drum solo at the Nine Inch Nails show. Is it like a drum solo if nobody else is playing and there's just a drummer, like in
y
all cases? Maybe.
I mean, I guess.
Like usually you think of a quote drum solo as very show offy, like
Yeah.
we are all stepping aside and just letting the drummer do their thing. Nine Inch Nails was a little more blended in, but Agriculture, straight up drum solo. So maybe you don't expect a band of that kind of DIY status to do the rock and roll drum solo, but they very much did, and the crowd very much loved it. Each member kind of got a solo in Agriculture. The other guitarist, who was really doing like this proggy, metally, super metal, you know, Steve Vai, whatever you want to call it, guitar solo, really good. Probably got that totally wrong. Probably didn't sound like Steve Vai, but my mind goes to Guitar Heroes.
Yeah, like
Uh,
shredders, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, they, putting their guitars in the air at times. The screamed vocals that the guy who does clean vocal, they both do clean vocals, actually. The two vocalists, they both do clean vocals. They both do screamy vocals. A lot of variety in vocals going on. Two different,
Mhm.
slightly different shrieks slash screams and different clean vocal sounds. Anyway, really good. Go see Agriculture. And getting big, right? This show at Bowery Ballroom, 500, 600 cap, was sold out. And they added a second show at Baby's All Right, smaller venue, the very next day. And they added a third show, which happened earlier the same day at Rough Trade, which is the record store in New York City that has recently moved into a bigger space. So they have like this bigger spot to do in stores. I don't know how long the Rough Trade set was, but they played two shows that day and one show the night before. I heard all three were great. I know someone who went, Nick, who hosts our Sirius show, went to both Babies and Rough Trade in the same day. A lot of people really love Agriculture, important band.
Yeah, it's really happening for them, much deserved.
Yeah, and so that was Friday. I went to Agriculture. Saturday, I went to all the way to New Jersey and Newark, took the path, long commute to see Nine Inch Nails. And then Sunday night, instead of resting, I then went to Music Hall of Williamsburg, the venue which was modeled after Bowery Ballroom that I was at 2 nights earlier, which is closing at the end of this year. I was thinking while I was there, will this be my last time at Music Hall of Williamsburg? Could be. They are sadly, after many years, closing. They lost their lease, whatever. That they're in on North 6 in Williamsburg, which has become like Prada stores on the same block, which was nothing like that when they first opened. Anyway, saw Zabalba, as he said, opened by Crush Your Soul, which is another project with the singer of Mind Force, who is always amazing. And this band was also amazing. If you appreciate Mind Force, definitely go check out Crush Your Soul, who released an album this year. And LIE opened and and they were awesome too. It's like they're from Houston. Zabalba are from Southern California. Latino hardcore, which was, being repped really hard, especially by Lie, but also Zabalba and Killer. Also a packed, sold out show. Zabalba don't play very much anymore. And people were excited. Heavy show. Great.
Awesome. Nine Inch Nails having Josh Freese came out of the big drummer trade where Josh Freese was like in Foo Fighters for a day, and now Foo Fighters have Alon Rubin, who was in Nine Inch Nails for a while. And just days after you saw Nine Inch Nails with Josh Freese, Foo Fighters announced their first album since Alon Rubin joined. It's called Your Favorite Toy, and the title track is out now. And I might even say it's the most indie sleazy Foo Fighters song. I don't know. It's like, it sounds like garage rock. It sounds like they're like it could have been a White Stripe song. Obviously Dave Grohl's into like the Stooges, the Sonic, stuff like that. And I always like when the Foo Fighters kind of embrace their punk roots a little more overtly. It's always funny to me to like look at their lineup and realize it's like Dave Grohl of Nirvana and Scream, Pat Smear of Nirvana and the Germs, Nate Mendel from Sunny Day Real Estate, Chris Shiflett, who is in, I think, like No Use for a Name and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. It's like basically like a punk supergroup. So, but they're often not that. So I like when they do like these punkier things, and this song is a little more raw, a little more garagey, and so making me very curious about. I liked the last Foo Fighters album a lot. I thought it was my favorite thing they released in quite some time. So I'm pretty curious about this new one.
Dave Grohl, you're reminding me, also gets a mention on the other new episode of our other podcast, BV Interviews. Bill talked to the Cardinals, member of Cardinals. Are they indie sleaze? Cardinals, great new album out this year, post-punk at least, whatever. Irish band that use an accordion, but not in a traditional way. And it's a good album, Cardinals. Check that out. And go listen to the episode of BV Interviews where Bill talks to the Cardinals member, because they drop kind of an exclusive. I think they may have leaked some info about Dave Grohl collaborating with a huge star. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil it here.
I'm curious to find out because I haven't listened to that episode yet. And if he's drumming, I always like when Dave Grohl drums for anyone.
That's what I assume it is. It was the Cardinals revealed they were in the studio while Dave Grohl was playing with a big star, which was probably not showcasing his punk side, for what it's worth.
Interesting.
I assume.
Okay. You know who is indie sleaze? Peaches.
Yes. And she's also Electroclash.
She's definitely also Electroclash. And her new album, No Lube So Rude, her first in 11 years, is one of the many albums out this week that the Brooklyn Vegan team is excited about. Bill reviews it in Indie Basement. And let's talk about some others. The album that I'm most excited about this week is the second record from the Mesthetics and James Brandon Lewis. It's called Deface the Currency. The Mesthetics are the jazz punk band with Fugazi's rhythm section and a guitar player whose name is Anthony Pirog. Might be saying his name wrong. They did a self-titled album 2 years ago, and I thought it was like some of the best jazz punk crossover I've heard in a long time. And now they're back, picking up right where they left off. More guitar solos on this one. Maybe the Agriculture guitarists should be listening to this record. But yeah, I really like what these two do together. Also, a really interesting record out this week is Willow's new album, Pedal Rock Black. That's Willow as in Willow Smith. And Willow's kind of changed her sound up a lot over the years. She's done a lot of different genres of music. This one, she's kind of in like psychedelic soul, spiritual jazz, tribal polyrhythms kind of realm. She self-produced the album. She played a lot of the instruments herself. way different for her, really cool. Kamasi Washington, George Clinton, and Tune Yards are all on it. And it sounds like a record that those three people would all be on. So also very cool record.
If you told me 10 years ago that Tune Yards would be on an album with Will Smith's daughter one day, I don't know if I would have believed you.
I mean, there's a lot that if you would have told me 10 years ago about what Will Smith's daughter would be doing, I wouldn't believe you. Like, I feel like she has transcended Nepo Baby and just become like such a great artist who happens to have rich, famous parents.
Yeah, and I didn't even mean it from that point of view.
No,
It was more like,
I didn't think you did. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like you know, as she's just kind of like stepped out on her own and done a lot of things I never would have guessed. And two very different, very cool punk records out this week. One is Toys That Kill. It's called Triple Sabotage. It's their first album in a decade. If you're unfamiliar, Toys That Kill are like West Coast cult pop punk heroes. They're kind of like, I mean, last year we got that new Radioactivity album, and I feel like Toys That Kill are kind of like a similar, like a West Coast version of like Markmen a little bit, Markmen Radioactivity kind of thing like that. Although Todd, the leader of the band, with his old band FYP, had been around even longer than Markmen, but they just kind of have that like raw, garagey, super melodic pop punk thing that's like, it's like the kind of pop punk that's only for the heads, like more an underground pop punk, I guess. I don't know. I'm not doing good here, but also if you like ska punk.
What about for the Off with Their Heads? Sorry, that's who Toys That Kill are touring with.
Oh, are they? Yeah, that's a good. Yeah. Toys That Kill are also like, they're like kind of your favorite band's favorite band kind of thing. Especially if your favorite band is Joyce Manor. They have a split with them. They have a split with Iron Chic, which you reminded me with Off with Their Heads. Iron Chic, kind of similar. If you're into ska punk, and even if you're not into ska punk, but if you maybe could be, then you should check out Hans Gruber and the Die Hard's new self-titled record. They're just one of the fastest bands in the modern ska punk scene. They have a little klezmer, a little Latin music, a really pointed political point of view. And it's just a crazy, fast, chaotic, aggressive record. I wrote in my review that it kind of sounds like a cross between Voodoo Glow Skulls and Gogol Bordello, and it's just even crazier than that sounds like it might be on paper. And then to cool down from the chaos is the laid-back, smooth, smoky rap album from Currency, Larry June, and The Alchemist called Spiral Staircases. Just like some of the best, just like sit back and relax, kind of, super, super smoky rap stuff. You can just feel the blunt smoke in the room when you listen to this record. Very, very good. And a record that came out last week, but I hadn't heard, and I want to mention now, is Aaron Shaw. He's in the LA jazz scene. It's his first album as a band leader. It's called And So It Is. And he's done work with Tyler the Creator, Herbie Hancock, Anderson .Paak, all over the place. He's also a member of Carlos Nino and Friends. And Carlos Nino is even more of a household name now because he was the sort of the core collaborator on Andre 3000's jazz album. And Carlos Nino also co-produced this record. He plays on it. And it's just like such a cool mix of like really meditative jazz and sort of the Alice Coltrane style, but also some more kind of like gentle mid-60s like piano bass kind of post-bop stuff. And there's a interpretation of a Chick Corea song, which is basically that kind of mid-60s piano, that's where that kind of influence comes from. But there's also an interpretation of Kendrick Lamar and Flying Lotus's Never Catch Me. So this is a good one for the new heads, the old heads, the hip hop people, the jazz people. It's a really beautiful record. And I haven't heard the Baby Keem album yet, but that's probably going to be this week's biggest album for a lot of people. So maybe we'll hear more about that. And then meanwhile, you can find my reviews of those albums and notable releases on BrooklynVegan.com. And in Indie Basement, you can find Bill's reviews of that Peaches record, as well as the new album by the Would Be Goods, which is C86 era indie pop vet Jessica Griffin. Um, and that's out on Heavenly's Skepwax label. Heavenly being another veteran indie pop band that Bill recently interviewed on his show, BV Interviews podcast. And then Hen Ogleth is the another moniker of Richard Dawson, and another project of Richard Dawson, and it's like kind of a proggy new wave art rock group. And this is their 5th album called Discombobulated, out this week. And the German electronic veteran Apparat has a new album called A Hum of Maybe, his first in 6 years. And Bill says that fans of Tom York's solo records should give this mellow atmospheric album a spin. I'm pretty sure Tom York and Apparat have collaborated. And those are great collaborations, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I agree with that. Any Tom York fan has got to be on Apparat for sure.
Tom York definitely sang on an Apparat song. You know who else has collaborated with Apparat? Fellow German electronic musician Boys Noise, who has not been around as long. I think Apparat is like started earlier in the 2000s, and but I did just confirm one thing. I brought up that Boys Noise probably played Indie Sleaze venue Studio B back in the day in Brooklyn. And in fact, here's a great Indie Sleaze lineup for you. I can't remember if I was at this show. On December 16th, 2006, Boys Noise headlined a show at Studio B with Crystal Castles and maybe kind of forgotten Indie Sleaze dance punk band of the time, Foreign Islands. Anyway.
So forgotten that I don't know if I can remember what they sound like.
Not to be confused with Future Islands, who would have been playing around the same.
Future Islands, and then there's that band Foreign Born. My brain went there too.
Yeah, that was all happening. Future Islands, Indie Sleaze?
Yes, especially the early stuff.
Even though by the time Future Islands blew up, thanks to that Letterman performance, Indie Sleaze was probably over.
Well, that's what I mean by early. Before that.
Yeah.
They were associated with like Dan Deacon. I feel like Dan Deacon counts as Indie Sleaze.
Okay. So now that means Indie Sleaze was happening in Baltimore, actually. Was the Wham City scene Indie Sleaze?
I mean, like, I feel like yes.
Is Dan Deacon Wham City or Purchase College?
Well, he's definitely a Purchase College.
Is Purchase College Indie Sleaze?
It wasn't when I was there. It was.
What songs do we have out this week?
Well, we talked about the Foo Fighters song, and it was a lot of stuff. Failure announced a new record, which is a big one. Although the new song sounds nothing like classic Failure. So if you're interested in Failure because they kind of helped pioneer the heavy shoegaze thing that's now everywhere, they're not doing that anymore. They're doing other stuff, and it's still cool. And Hayley Williams is on this record, which is especially cool, especially because she Paramore covered a Failure song on like one of their earliest releases. So now they're collaborating 20 years after that cover came out. And we're excited because we have an exclusive opaque silver metallic vinyl variant of this Failure album up for pre-order in the BB shop. What else? Thurston Moore and Kramer have a collaborative album coming. Super cool. My new band, Believe, is a project of former Black Midi bassist vocalist Cameron Picton. We got album announcements and lead singles from Yaya Bay, Cola. A Glenn Hansard live album was announced. An EP of medieval folk music from Tanya Donnelly of Belly, the Breeders and Throwing Muses, and Chris Brokaw of Cum and Codeine was announced. Some music from that is streaming now. So a lot of cool stuff. What else happened this week?
Dee Snider of Twisted Sister says, I'm not dying after the Twisted Sister frontman retired from touring. The rumors have run wild that I'm on my deathbed. I am not. I just can't do these things that I did in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s. We're glad to hear Dee Snider is doing okay. Damon Albarn talked about the muted crowd reaction to Blur's 2024 Coachella set in a new interview at Rolling Stone, calling the booking a slight mismatch and the festival the embodiment of social media now. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band have announced the Land of Hope and Dreams American Tour, and the tour poster has "No Kings" written in all caps. That's coming to Brooklyn, and also Prudential Center, where I just saw Nine Inch Nails, right? I think I saw Bruce at Prudential Center many years ago. U2 Surprise released a new political EP and say an album is coming later this year.
So we're getting a Bruce Springsteen No Kings tour and a political U2 EP. Rolling Stone magazine dream.
A dream for me is that Sturgill Simpson announced a new album under his Johnny Blue Skies moniker. I love that last Johnny Blue Skies album and Sturgill in general. But it will only...
You won't get to hear this one because of what you said at the beginning of the episode.
On physical media, no streaming. I'll need to go turn on that record player, take the vinyl out of... I don't know. What do you think is that like a permanent thing he's saying, that it's just physical?
I mean, all I know is what he said.
What is he, a rapper? I don't know. I'm just thinking of other recent... There's like an Arm & Hammer album from last year that's physical only, right?
And Mac Hami's always doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. You know, he's trying to just... It's a good way to... I think it's different than those like... Because those are like rare and expensive, like the Mac Hami ones. But I think it's just going to be like... You could just buy it anytime for a normal price, but you just have to actually buy it to listen to it. And I think that's a cool way to promote physical media.
I'm all about physical media, and hopefully we can sell that in our physical media shop. I don't know. Oh, we are actually. No, we are already. Go pick that up at shop.
Oh, it's up for pre-order? Nice.
Yes, I just remembered that. It is in there.
Good place to pre-order it.
Yes. Shoegaze veterans Chapter House have announced their first North American tour in 16 years, surrounding their previously announced appearances at Nothing's Slide-Away festivals, which happen in multiple cities each year now. Shoegaze Festival. And Fish have announced a summer tour, including Madison Square Garden and Fenway Park runs. Are Fish indie sleaze?
No.
This week in Geese. Wilco's Jeff Tweedy covered Cameron Winter's Love Takes Miles for Valentine's Day. Wilco were, around during Indie Sleaze, and you just said Geese are Indie Sleaze. You said the National.
I would say that, yeah, like Yankee Hotel Foxtrot era Wilco is adjacent the same way the National is,
This week in things Andrew's really excited about, the Hotelier announced some 10th anniversary shows for Goodness.
Their actual best album.
Some rare Led Zeppelin footage from 1972 just resurfaced. Go check that out on the Brooklyn Vegan Instagram. And it's a little not safe for work, honestly. Bill, as we mentioned, interviewed Cardinals for the new episode of BV Interviews. Go listen to that. Find out the scoop on Dave Grohl. And ending on a sad note, seriously, rest in peace, Manchester Orchestra drummer Tim Very. Very shocking news.
Really, really
the
sad.
other day.
I think he's 42 years old.
Please subscribe to this podcast. Thank you for listening. As always, go check out BrooklynVegan.com. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, you forgot one of your headlines. You forgot about Lana Del Rey.
Oh, after delaying her album many times.
Got it? You're going to go for it?
Lana Del Rey shared a new song from it this week and now says it will come out in approximately 3 months.
Not holding our breath.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Dave and I will be back every Friday morning with new episodes of BB Weekly. And in between the episodes, you can always get much more from us at BrooklynVegan.com, on all of our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can pick up records from us at shop.BrooklynVegan.com. And if you like what you hear, tell your friends about us, subscribe to the show, give us a good rating. All that little stuff goes a really long way. It really helps us a lot, and we really appreciate it. So until then, thank you again, and see you next time.